I was the one who called 911. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. The dispatcher's voice kept asking me to repeat myself, and I remember thinking how absurd it all sounded coming out of my mouth. My grandmother? I think she murdered 4 men. Her husbands, all of them. The dispatcher went quiet for a moment, then, "Ma'am, are you saying you want to report a murder?" 4 murders, I corrected, my voice cracking. 4 murders spanning 37 years. That was 3 years ago. Today, my grandmother sits in a maximum security prison, serving 4 consecutive life sentences. She's 81 years old. She bakes cookies for the guards. She leads a prayer group on Wednesdays. And every single person in that facility, staff and inmates alike, calls her Sweet Nana Rose. Because that's what she is. Sweet. That's what everyone has always said about her. Sweet Nana Rose with her white curls and her floral dresses and her homemade apple pie that won ribbons at the county fair 12 years running. I used to believe it too. But here's what I know now. The sweetest smiles can hide the darkest secrets. And the person you trust most in the world can be the one you should fear. This is the story of how I discovered my grandmother was a serial killer, and how loving her almost destroyed me. My grandmother raised me. That's important to understand from the beginning. This isn't a story about some distant relative I barely knew. Rose Whitmore was the most significant person in my life. When my parents died in a car accident when I was 7, a drunk driver, head-on collision, they say it was instant. Grandma Rose didn't hesitate. She took me in, converted her sewing room into a bedroom painted the exact shade of lavender I'd asked for, and became my entire world. She was 63 when I moved in, already a widow 4 times over, though I didn't think much about that as a child. I knew she'd been married before. There were photos scattered throughout her house of different men at different periods, but she never seemed sad about it. God needed them more than I did, she'd say with that gentle smile, touching the locket around her neck that held tiny photos of all 4 husbands. Everyone in our town of Millbrook, Connecticut, knew Rose Whitmore. She volunteered at the library every Tuesday. She brought casseroles to new mothers. She never missed a Sunday service at St. Catherine's Episcopal Church, where she'd been a member for 43 years. When Hurricane Sandy hit in 2012, she opened her home to 3 displaced families and cooked for all of them for 2 weeks straight. The local newspaper did a feature on her once when I was 15. Millbrook's Angel, they called her. The article mentioned her 4 deceased husbands. Rose has known tragedy, the reporter wrote, but she channels her grief into service, and included a photo of her in her garden, surrounded by the roses she was named after. I kept that article. I used to look at it with pride. Now I keep it as a reminder that we only see what we want to see. I should tell you about the husbands, not because you need to know their full life stories, though they each had one, complete with dreams and families and futures that were stolen, but because understanding who they were makes what happened to them even more horrifying. Husband number 1, Robert Whitmore, married 1967, died 1977. I never knew Robert. He died 18 years before I was born. But I knew his smile from the wedding photo that sat on Grandma's mantel, young and handsome in his Navy uniform, his arm around a 25-year-old Rose who looked like she'd stepped out of a fairy tale in her tea-length wedding dress. He was my first love, Grandma told me once, running her finger along the frame. We were so young, so naive. We thought we'd live forever. Robert died of heart failure at 35. Just collapsed one day while mowing the lawn. The death certificate listed it as a cardiac event. Unexpected, but not impossible, the doctor had said. Sometimes these things just happen. Husband Thacker, too, James Porter, married 1979, died 1986. James owned the hardware store downtown. I remember his photo too, older than Robert, with kind eyes and a gentle receding hairline. In the pictures, he's always wearing plaid shirts and has his arm around Grandma, who looks happy, genuinely happy. James gave me stability, Grandma would say. After Robert, I didn't think I could love again, but James was patient. He waited for me. James died of a stroke. He was 51. Again, unexpected but not impossible. He'd had high blood pressure, was a bit overweight. These things happen, especially to men in their 50s who don't take care of themselves. Husband number 3, Michael Chen, married 1988, died 1998. Michael was different from the others. He was an engineer, originally from San Francisco, who'd moved to Millbrook for a job with a manufacturing company nearby. He was sophisticated, well-traveled, and according to everyone who knew them, absolutely devoted to Rose. "Michael showed me the world," Grandma used to say, and she meant it literally. They traveled. Hawaii, Europe, even a cruise through Alaska. The photo albums from those years show a glamorous Rose in her 50s, standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, hiking through rainforests, laughing on beaches. Michael died of kidney failure. He was 60 when it happened, and he'd been sick for about a year before. Dialysis, doctor's appointments, the whole ordeal. It was sad, everyone said, but at least Rose had been there with him through it all. What a devoted wife. Husband number 4, Thomas Brennan, married 2000, died 2014. Tom was the only husband I actually knew. I was 12 when he died, 15 when Grandma married him. He was a retired postal worker, a widower himself, and he was absolutely crazy about my grandmother and about me. Tom taught me how to ride a bike. He came to my school plays. He'd sneak me extra dessert when Grandma wasn't looking and wink like we were co-conspirators. He called me kiddo and meant it with such affection that it made my chest hurt. "Your grandmother saved my life," he told me once. I was 14 and we were fishing at the lake behind the house. After my Ruth died, I didn't think I'd ever feel alive again. Then I met Rose, and suddenly I had a reason to wake up in the morning. Tom died of respiratory failure. He'd had COPD. A lifetime of smoking had caught up with him. He spent his last 3 months on oxygen, getting weaker, and Grandma never left his side. I watched her care for him with such tenderness, such devotion. She'd sing to him when he couldn't sleep. She'd hold his hand through the coughing fits. When he died, I held her while she cried. Real tears, real grief. Or so I thought. After Tom died, something shifted in our house. Not immediately. Grief takes time, and for months, Grandma seemed genuinely broken. She'd sit in Tom's chair in the evenings, running her hands over the worn armrests. She kept his coffee mug in the cupboard, couldn't bring herself to donate his clothes. But by the time I graduated high school in 2016, she'd come back to herself. That's what everyone said. "Rose is so strong. Look how she's recovered. 4 husbands gone, and she still finds joy in life." I went to college 30 minutes away, close enough to visit every weekend, which I did religiously. Grandma would cook my favorite meals, and we'd watch old movies and talk about my classes, my friends, my dreams. She wanted to know everything. She was my best friend. I graduated in 2020, right as the pandemic hit. I moved back in with Grandma, partly because the world was falling apart, partly because I'd just broken up with my boyfriend and couldn't afford my own place. It was supposed to be temporary. Instead, it became the period of time that would change everything. Those pandemic years were strange for everyone, but in that house with Grandma, they took on a surreal quality. We were isolated, just the 2 of us, and we grew even closer. We baked bread. We started a garden. We watched every episode of The Great British Bake Off twice. Grandma taught me things during those months. How to can vegetables, how to quilt, how to make her famous apple pie from scratch, a recipe she said had been in her family for generations. "This is important," she'd say, as she guided my hands through the dough. "Knowing how to take care of yourself, knowing how to be self-sufficient. You can't always rely on other people, sweetheart." I thought it was just pandemic anxiety talking. The world felt unstable, and here was my grandmother, teaching me survival skills wrapped in domesticity. I didn't realize she was teaching me her own twisted version of independence. By 2022, I'd gotten a job as a junior editor at a small publishing house. I was working from home, still, living with Grandma, and life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. I was 29. Grandma was 79. We had our routines, our jokes, our quiet life together. And then I started digitizing the family photos. It started as a birthday present. Grandma's 80th birthday was coming up in November 2022, and I wanted to do something special. I'd noticed that many of our old family photos were fading, some were damaged, and they were scattered in various albums and boxes throughout the house. I decided to scan them all, organize them digitally, and create a beautiful photo book she could treasure. She loved photography. She always had. There were thousands of photos in that house. Her parents, her childhood, her 4 weddings, her life with each husband, and me, of course. Photos of every stage of my life, meticulously documented. I started in the attic on a Saturday morning in September. Grandma was at her volunteer shift at the library every Tuesday and Saturday like clockwork, which gave me uninterrupted time to work. The attic was organized chaos. Grandma was neat about most things, but up here boxes were stacked haphazardly, labeled in her careful handwriting. Robert years, James years, Michael years, Tom years, Sally baby photos. Sally was my mother. Emma childhood. That was me. I pulled down the first box, Robert years, and started sorting through it. Wedding photos, honeymoon photos, photos of a young couple building a life together. They looked so happy. Rose was radiant, Robert was doting. There were photos of their first house, their garden, their friends. And then there was a folder I almost missed. It was stuck to the bottom of the box, bent and yellowed. No label. I pulled it out and opened it. Insurance documents, life insurance. Robert Whitmore had a life insurance policy for $50,000. In 1977, that was a significant sum. The beneficiary form was stapled to the policy. Beneficiary, Rose Whitmore, wife. There was a payout confirmation letter dated 3 months after his death. Claim approved. $50,000. I sat back on my heels. This wasn't unusual. Married couples had life insurance. But something about seeing it, the stark reality of money changing hands after death, made me pause. I pulled down the James Years box. More photos, more happy memories. James and Rose at the hardware store's grand opening. James and Rose at someone's wedding. James and Rose in their kitchen, her with flour on her nose, him laughing. And another folder, life insurance policy, $100,000. Beneficiary, Rose Whitmore, wife. Payout confirmation, 3 months after his death in 1986. My heart started beating faster. Michael Years, life insurance policy, $250,000. By the 90s, policies were getting bigger. Payout confirmation, 4 months after his death in 1998. Tom Years, life insurance policy, $175,000. Payout confirmation, 2 months after his death in 2014. I sat in that attic surrounded by boxes and photos, and suddenly, horribly, I started doing math. $50,000, $100,000, $250,000, $175,000, $575,000. Over the span of 37 years, my grandmother had received $575,000 in life insurance payouts. 4 husbands, 4 deaths, 4 payouts. I told myself I was being ridiculous. People have life insurance, spouses or beneficiaries. This was normal, this was fine. But my hands were shaking as I put the folders back. I didn't tell Grandma what I'd found that day. When she came home from the library, I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to look normal, trying to smile when she asked about my progress on the photo project. It's going well, I lied. Lots of great memories up there. She smiled. We've had a good life, haven't we, sweetheart? We have, I said, and I meant it. But that night, lying in my childhood bedroom with its lavender walls, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing those numbers, those folders, those smiling photos of men who are now dead. 4 husbands, all dead before their time, all with life insurance policies, all with Rose as the beneficiary. I told myself it was a coincidence. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself that my sweet grandmother, who made apple pie and volunteered at libraries and led prayer groups, couldn't possibly be what my brain was starting to suggest. But here's the thing about truth. Once you start seeing it, you can't unsee it. And I had just glimpsed the edge of something dark. I should have left it alone. That's what I told myself the next morning, standing in the shower, trying to wash away the paranoid thoughts from the night before. It was just insurance. It was normal. I was making something out of nothing. But by Monday morning, I was on my laptop, searching. I started with the deaths themselves. I knew the basic facts. They were family lore, part of Grandma's sad but well-known history. But I'd never looked into the details before. Why would I? They were tragic, but they were in the past. Now I needed to know more. Robert Whitmore died July 12th, 1977. I found his death certificate through an online genealogy website. Cause of death: cardiac arrest. The certifying physician was Dr. Harold Benson. I found an obituary for him dated 2003. He'd been 91 when he died. I found Robert's obituary next. Robert James Whitmore, 35, died suddenly at his home on Tuesday. He is survived by his beloved wife Rose and his parents. The funeral had been at St. Catherine's, burial at Millbrook Cemetery. Nothing unusual. A sudden death, yes, but sudden deaths happen. James Porter died October 18, 1986. Death certificate: cerebrovascular accident, stroke. Certifying physician: Dr. Margaret Walsh. I found her still listed as a retired doctor living in Florida. James's obituary was longer. James Benjamin Porter, 51, passed away unexpectedly at his home on Saturday. A pillar of the community, an owner of Porter's Hardware, he will be deeply missed. He is survived by his devoted wife Rose, his sister Catherine. Same cemetery, same church, same unexpected death at home. Michael Chen died March 3rd, 1998. Death certificate: renal failure. But I found medical records. Michael had been sick. There were hospital visits, dialysis records. This one looked legitimate. A man with kidney disease dies of kidney failure, except I found something else. A credit card statement in one of the boxes, accidentally filed with photos. It showed charges from early 1998, medical equipment, pharmacy charges, and then, 2 weeks before Michael's death, a large charge at a home improvement store. For what? Why would someone caring for a dying husband need home improvement supplies? I told myself I was reaching, but I wrote it down anyway. Thomas Brennan died June 15th, 2014. I knew this one intimately. I'd been there. I'd watched him decline. COPD, respiratory failure. It made sense. But now, looking at his death certificate with new eyes, I noticed something. The certifying physician wasn't Tom's regular doctor. It was Dr. Samuel Martinez from Millbrook General Hospital Emergency Room. Tom had died at home. We'd had hospice, but the death certificate was signed by an ER doctor. Why? I spent 3 days doing this research, staying up late after Grandma went to bed, clearing my browser history like I was having an affair. And slowly, horribly, a pattern started to emerge. All 4 men died at home. All 4 deaths were certified by different doctors, none of whom had been the men's regular physicians. All 4 deaths happened when the men were alone with Rose, or shortly after being in her care. All 4 men had life insurance policies that paid out within a few months, and all 4 men died of things that could be caused. Heart attacks can be induced, strokes can be triggered, kidney failure can be accelerated, respiratory failure can be helped along. If you know what you're doing, if you're patient enough, if everyone trusts you, I felt sick. I actually ran to the bathroom on the 3rd night of research and threw up, gripping the toilet while my mind raced. This was my grandmother, the woman who raised me, the woman who sang me lullabies and made my Halloween costumes and taught me how to bake. This was insane, but I couldn't stop. I became obsessed. That's the only word for it. What started as idle curiosity about insurance documents became a consuming need to know the truth. I couldn't eat. I couldn't focus on work. Every time I looked at Grandma, sweet, gentle Grandma making breakfast or tending her roses, I saw a stranger. Or worse, I saw exactly who she'd always been. And I'd just been too blind to notice. I started going through everything in that house. Not obviously. I couldn't let her know what I was doing. But whenever she was out, I was searching, and the more I found, the more terrified I became. In a box labeled recipes in the back of her bedroom closet, I found something that stopped my heart. A notebook. Small, leather-bound, the pages yellowed with age. The handwriting was Grandma's. I'd know it anywhere, that careful cursive she'd learned in Catholic school in the 1950s. The first entry was dated 1976. Robert has been complaining of chest pains again. Dr. Benson says it's stress from work. I've been making him the tea every night. He says it helps him relax, 3 cups now before bed. He sleeps so soundly. I flipped forward, my hands trembling. Robert collapsed in the yard today. They say it was his heart. I'm devastated. He was so young. But at least he went peacefully. They said he probably didn't feel any pain. More pages. Mundane entries about daily life. Grief entries about missing Robert. And then, 1979. I met someone. James, he's kind, steady. Nothing like Robert, but maybe that's good. Maybe I need steady now. I skipped ahead. 1985. James has been having headaches, bad ones. I suggested he see Dr. Walsh, but he's stubborn about doctors. Men are so foolish about their health. I've been making him my mother's old remedy, the one she used for my father. It helps with the pain, he says. 1986. James had a stroke this morning, so sudden, so shocking. Dr. Walsh said these things can happen without warning, especially with his blood pressure. I should have made him go to the doctor sooner. I'll never forgive myself. The notebook continued. Pages and pages. Entries about Michael, about his kidney disease, about special broths she made to help with his symptoms. Entries about Tom, about his breathing problems, about herbal teas that were so much better than all those chemicals the doctors prescribe. And throughout it all, references to mother's old remedies and natural treatments and family recipes. I sat on the floor of her closet, that notebook in my lap, and I understood. She'd been poisoning them, slowly, carefully, over months or even years, making them tea, making them food, making them remedies that she claimed would help, but that were actually killing them. And she'd documented it all, hidden in plain sight as innocent recipes and concerned wife observations. The notebook fell from my hands. I couldn't breathe. I literally couldn't catch my breath. Because this meant it was real. This meant my grandmother, my sweet, loving grandmother who'd raised me and cared for me and been the only family I had, was a murderer. 4 times over. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough that I heard her car pull into the driveway. Long enough that I had to scramble to put everything back, to hide the notebook exactly where I'd found it, to close the closet door and race to my room and sit at my desk like I'd been working all along. Emma, I'm home. Her voice drifted up the stairs, cheerful and warm. Hey, Grandma, I called back, and my voice sounded almost normal. Almost. She appeared in my doorway minutes later, still in her coat, holding a bag from the bakery. I got those cinnamon rolls you like. Thought we could have them with tea. Tea. The word hung in the air between us, though she didn't know why. That sounds great, I said, and I smiled, and she smiled back. And I realized with horrible clarity that I was a good liar because she had raised me. I didn't touch the cinnamon roll. I made an excuse, said I'd had a late lunch, I was still full, and I watched her eat hers, chatting about her day at the library, about Mrs. Henderson's new grandchild, about the book club selection for next month. I watched her hands as she tore the roll into pieces, delicate hands, grandmother hands, hands that had braided my hair and bandaged my scraped knees, and apparently had also carefully measured out poison into teacups for 4 different men over the course of decades. That night, I lay in bed and tried to figure out what to do. The logical answer was obvious. Call the police. But every time I reached for my phone, I froze. Because calling the police meant the end of my grandmother's life. She was 80. Prison would destroy her. And even if I was right, even if every horrible suspicion was true, she was still the woman who raised me. She was still the only family I had. And there was a darker thought, one I'm ashamed to admit. What if I was wrong? The notebook could be innocent. Maybe mother's remedies were just herbal teas. Maybe the life insurance was coincidental. Maybe I was seeing patterns that weren't there because I'd let paranoia take over. 4 men dying over 37 years wasn't impossible. Unlikely, maybe, Tragic, certainly, but not impossible. Except I knew I wasn't wrong. Deep in my gut, in that place where truth lives before logic can get to it, I knew. I started researching poisons. I know how that sounds. The granddaughter of a suspected serial killer, Googling untraceable poisons at 2 a.m. But I needed to understand how she could have done it, and what I found was both fascinating and horrifying. There are dozens of substances that can cause heart attacks, strokes, organ failure. Many of them are derived from plants. Digitalis from foxglove, ricin from castor beans, aconite from monkshood. Administered in small doses over time, they mimic natural diseases. They're nearly impossible to detect in routine autopsies, especially if no one is looking for them. And no one would be looking. Because who suspects sweet Nana Rose? I found something else in my research. Most female serial killers use poison. They're patient killers, caregivers. They operate within relationships of trust, and they often go undetected for decades because poisoning looks like natural death. I read case studies of women who'd killed their husbands, their children, their patients, women who'd been nurses, mothers, wives, women who'd smiled at funerals and accepted condolences and collected insurance money and then done it all over again, women like my grandmother. By the fourth night of research, I'd made a decision. I needed more proof. Not for the police. I already had enough to raise serious questions. But for myself. I needed to be absolutely certain before I destroyed both of our lives. So I started watching her. Really watching her. Grandma's garden had always been her pride and joy. An acre of carefully tended plots behind the house, filled with vegetables, herbs, and, of course, roses. She spent hours out there, especially in spring and summer, and I'd always found it charming. My grandmother, in her sun hat and gardening gloves, surrounded by beauty she'd created. Now I looked at that garden with different eyes. I started identifying the plants. Most were innocent: tomatoes, lettuce, basil, rosemary. But there were others. Foxglove with its beautiful purple flowers, monkshood with its hood-shaped blue blooms, lily of the valley with its delicate white bells, all poisonous, all potentially lethal if prepared correctly. "You're taking an interest in gardening," Grandma said one Saturday morning, finding me crouched by the foxglove examining its leaves. "I'm so glad, sweetheart. This has always been my sanctuary." "It's beautiful," I said truthfully. "I never realized how many different plants you have." "Oh yes, my mother taught me. She knew all about herbs and flowers. Her mother taught her. Women's knowledge, passed down through generations." She knelt beside me, her knees cracking, and gently touched a foxglove bloom. People forget how powerful plants can be. They think medicine only comes from laboratories, but our ancestors knew better. "Like the remedies in your notebook?" The words were out before I could stop them. She went very still. "You found my recipe book?" I wanted to find that apple pie recipe. I saw a notebook. I didn't mean to pry. The lie came easily, too easily. Her face softened. "Oh, sweetheart, you can look through anything of mine. We don't have secrets." She patted my hand. "That notebook has been in our family for 3 generations. My grandmother's remedies, my mother's additions, and some of my own. Natural medicine, the kind that really works." "Do you use them on your husbands?" I kept my voice curious, innocent. "When they were sick?" "Of course." She said it so simply. "Modern medicine has its place, but sometimes the old ways are better, gentler, more natural." She stood up, brushing dirt from her knees. "Robert had such anxiety from his job. The doctors wanted to put him on pills, but I made him my grandmother's calming tea instead. Chamomile, lavender, and a few other ingredients. He slept like a baby." My blood ran cold. "And James with his headaches," she continued, moving to her tomato plants. "Dr. Walsh wanted to run all sorts of tests, but I knew it was just tension. My mother's willow bark tincture worked wonders. He always felt better after." She was confessing. She was standing in her garden on a beautiful October morning, and she was confessing to murder, and she didn't even realize it because she truly believed she'd been helping them. Or she wanted me to believe she believed that. "Michael's kidney disease was harder," she said, her back to me now. The doctors were aggressive with their treatment, dialysis, all those medications with terrible side effects. I supplemented with my own tonics, tried to support his system naturally. Did it help? My voice sounded far away. He lasted longer than the doctors predicted. She turned back to me, smiling. And he was comfortable. That's what matters, isn't it? Comfort in the end. And Tom? Tom was already on so much medication for his lungs. I just helped ease his suffering, made sure he could breathe easier, sleep better. The doctors had given up on him anyway. She said it all so matter-of-factly. No guilt, no shame, just a woman talking about caring for her sick husbands. You're a wonderful caregiver, I said, and I meant it as a test. She beamed. I learned from the best. And someday, Emma, I'll teach you everything I know. It's important to pass this knowledge on. You never know when you might need it. The implication hung in the air. I made an excuse and went inside, my heart hammering. I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. My face was pale, my eyes too wide. She'd just admitted it, not directly, but close enough. And that last part, you never know when you might need it. Was that a threat? A warning? Or was she really just an old woman who thought she was sharing family wisdom? I splashed cold water on my face and tried to think rationally, but rationality had abandoned me days ago. I was living in a house with a woman who'd killed 4 men, and she didn't see anything wrong with it. That's what terrified me most. The complete lack of remorse, the casual way she spoke about helping them. She'd reframed murder as mercy in her mind, and she believed it utterly. How do you turn in someone who doesn't think they've done anything wrong? I should have called the police then. Looking back, that was the moment. But I didn't. Instead, I fell into a strange pattern of pretending. I pretended everything was normal. I had breakfast with Grandma every morning. I worked at my laptop while she volunteered or gardened. We watched Jeopardy together every evening at 7:30. We existed in this bubble of false normalcy while I secretly planned what to do next. But the strain was showing. I stopped eating much, couldn't stomach food she'd prepared, even though she'd never hurt me. I was sure of that. I lost weight, stopped sleeping properly. I'd lie awake listening to the sounds of the house, imagining her grinding up monkshood in the kitchen, brewing death in a teapot. You look tired, sweetheart, she said one morning in late October. Are you feeling all right? I'm fine, just work stress. She studied me with those sharp blue eyes. You know you can tell me anything, right? I'm always here for you. The kindness in her voice made me want to scream, because that was the worst part. She wasn't a monster. She didn't rage or threaten or show any sign of the cold-blooded killer she must have been. She was just Grandma. Sweet, concerned, loving Grandma who genuinely cared about my well-being. How had she done it? How had she looked Robert in the eye while handing him poison tea? How had she held James's hand while his brain hemorrhaged from substances she'd been feeding him? How had she sat by Michael's bedside, watching his kidneys fail from her remedies? How had she comforted Tom in his last days, sung to him, loved him, while knowing she was the reason he couldn't breathe? And the most horrifying question of all, had she ever thought about using those remedies on me? That thought invaded my mind late one night, and I couldn't shake it. I was her only heir. When she died, I'd inherit everything, the house, her savings, whatever was left of that $575,000 in insurance money, plus whatever she'd accumulated over the years. If I ever became inconvenient, if I ever stood in her way, if I ever threatened to expose her, would she make me tea? I started checking my food. I'd watch her prepare meals and only eat things I'd seen her make, that I'd watched every step. I bought bottled water and kept it in my room. I told her I was on a new diet, eating simpler foods. She seemed hurt by this. I miss cooking for you properly, she said. You barely eat anything anymore. I'm just trying to be healthier, I lied. But I think she knew. On some level, I think she understood that something had shifted between us. The easy trust was gone, replaced by a careful dance of suspicion and denial. Then came the day that changed everything. It was November 15th. I remembered the date exactly because it was 2 weeks before her 80th birthday. the birthday I was supposedly planning that photo book for. I came home from a rare in-person meeting at work to find her in the kitchen, making tea. 2 cups sat on the counter, steam rising from them. "There you are," she said cheerfully. "I made your favorite, chamomile with honey." My favorite. She'd been making it for me since I was a child, whenever I couldn't sleep, whenever I was stressed, whenever I needed comfort. Chamomile with honey, chamomile, lavender, and a few other ingredients. Robert slept like a baby. My mouth went dry. "I'm not really in the mood for tea," I said carefully. Her smile faded slightly. "Oh, well, maybe later then." "Actually, I think I'm coming down with something. I'm going to lie down." I walked past her, past those 2 steaming cups, and up the stairs to my room. I closed the door, locked it, and sat on my bed, shaking. She hadn't done anything. She'd just made tea. It was probably fine. She'd never hurt me. I was being paranoid. But I couldn't stop thinking about Robert, drinking his calming tea every night, 3 cups before bed. He sleeps so soundly. Had she been planning to increase my dosage? Had I caught it just in time? Or was I losing my mind, seeing danger where there was only kindness? I heard her footsteps on the stairs, a soft knock on my door. "Emma? Sweetheart, I'm worried about you." "I'm fine, Grandma, just need to rest." A pause, then, "I love you, you know that? You're all I have." "I love you too." And God help me, it was true. That night I made my decision not to call the police, not yet, but to take one more step toward the truth. I needed to test her. I told her I'd met someone. It was a lie, but it needed to be believable. His name was David, I said. We'd met through work. He was smart, funny, kind. We'd been talking for a few weeks, and things were getting serious. Grandma's reaction was everything I needed to see. First surprise, then something else, something that flickered across her face so quickly I might have imagined it. Calculation? Assessment? "How wonderful," she said, her smile bright. "Tell me all about him." So I did. I invented David. His job as a financial consultant, his love of hiking, his close relationship with his family. I made him perfect. I made him wealthy. And most importantly, I made him serious about me. "He's been talking about the future," I said casually over dinner one night. "About us, I mean." "That's moving fast," Grandma said, her tone neutral. "I know. But when you know, right? You've always said that." "I have." She was quiet for a moment, pushing food around her plate. "What about your life here? Your job? This house?" "Well, that's the thing. David lives in Boston. If things continue like this, I might move there eventually." The fork stopped moving. She looked up at me, and in her eyes, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was gone in an instant, replaced by concern, but I'd seen it. Fear, not of losing me, fear of losing control. "That's a big decision," she said carefully. "You'd be leaving everything behind." "I'd visit all the time." "Would you?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "People always say that, but life gets busy. You'd have a new life, new priorities. I'd be here alone again." "Grandma." "I've been alone before." Her voice was soft. 4 times I've been left alone. I know how it feels. Left alone. As if her husbands had chosen to die. As if they'd abandoned her. The next 2 weeks were excruciating. I continued the David fiction, building him up, making plans. I said we were going away for a weekend. I said he wanted to meet her. I said we'd been talking about engagement. And I watched her. She became more attentive, more affectionate, more concerned about my health. Had I been sleeping well? Was I eating enough? I looked tired. Maybe I should have some tea. Always tea. She started asking questions about David, about his family. Did he have siblings? About his job? Did he travel much? About his health. Did he have any medical conditions? That last one stopped me cold. "Why would you ask that?" I said. "Just curious. It's important to know these things when you're thinking about spending your life with someone." I wanted to ask, like you knew about Robert's supposed anxiety, James's headaches, Michael's kidneys, Tom's breathing, but I didn't. Instead, I said David was perfectly healthy, athletic even, ran marathons. She smiled. How nice. That night, I found her in the garden at twilight, cutting foxglove. She had a basket full of it, purple blooms and leaves together. When she saw me watching from the window, she waved. I didn't wave back. The next morning, there was a small, wrapped package on the kitchen table with a note in her handwriting. For your new life with David, use sparingly. It's very strong. Love, Grandma. Inside was a mason jar filled with dark powder. No label, no indication of what it was. I stood in that kitchen, holding that jar, and I knew. This was the moment. This was the line I couldn't uncross. She'd given me poison, maybe to test me, maybe to teach me, maybe as a gift in her twisted understanding of family tradition. She was passing on her knowledge, just like her mother had passed it to her, and her grandmother before that. She was inviting me into her legacy of murder. Or, and this was the thought that made me want to vomit, maybe she expected me to use it on David, to eliminate him before he could take me away from her. I took the jar to my room and hid it in my closet. Then I sat on my bed and cried for the first time since this whole nightmare had begun. Real, gut-wrenching sobs that shook my entire body. Because I'd lost her. Whether I turned her in or not, whether she'd actually killed anyone, or if I was imagining the whole thing, I'd lost her. The grandmother I'd loved was gone, replaced by this stranger who gave me jars of poison and smiled like she'd done me a favor. When I could breathe again, I pulled out my phone. It was time. I didn't call 911 immediately. First, I needed to be smart about this. I took the jar to a pharmacy that offered drug testing services. I paid cash, used a fake name, and said I'd found it in my house and wanted to know what it was. 3 days later, I got the results. Aconitine, a potent poison derived from monkshood, highly toxic, can cause cardiac arrest, paralysis, death. Untraceable in standard autopsies if administered properly. I had proof, not of the murders. That would require exhuming bodies, running tests, investigations that might never find anything after so many years. But I had proof that my grandmother was still making poison, still preparing it, still keeping it ready. For whom? For me, if I ever became a problem? For some future husband, number 5? For David, my fictional boyfriend who threatened to take me away? It didn't matter. What mattered was that she was dangerous, and she needed to be stopped. But I still couldn't pick up the phone. I spent 2 more days in agony, playing out every scenario. If I turned her in, what would happen? She'd be arrested, investigated. The police would exhume the bodies, at least Tom, maybe others. They'd test for poisons, they might find evidence, they might not. Even if they did, would anyone believe it? She was 80 years old. She was Millbrook's angel. She had an entire town ready to testify to her good character. And what did I have? A jar of poison that could have come from anywhere. A notebook of recipes that could be interpreted as harmless herbal remedies. Suspicions and circumstantial evidence. She might walk free. And then what? Would she forgive me for trying to destroy her? Or would I become another problem that needed a solution? But if I didn't turn her in, I had to live with this knowledge. I had to know that 4 men had died, and I'd let their murderer go free. I had to wonder if she'd do it again, and I had to wonder every single day if I was next. On November 27th, Thanksgiving, Grandma made a feast. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, gravy, her famous apple pie. She set the table beautifully the way she always did for holidays, with the good china and candles and flowers from her garden. Just us, she said, smiling. The way I like it, my girl and me. We sat down to eat and she served me a plate, and I stared at the food. What's wrong? She asked. Nothing. You haven't been eating. You haven't been yourself. She reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was soft, papery thin, grandmother skin. Emma, what's going on? You can tell me anything. This was my chance. I could confront her. I could lay it all out. The insurance money, the notebook, the poisons, the pattern. I could ask her directly, did you kill them? But I looked at her face, lined with age and love and something I couldn't quite name, and I couldn't do it. I'm just stressed, I said. Work, life, everything. She squeezed my hand. You work too hard. You need to rest more. Take care of yourself. I will. Promise me something. Her voice was serious now. Promise me you'll always be careful. The world is dangerous. You can't trust everyone. The irony was suffocating. I promise, Grandma. We ate Thanksgiving dinner, and I forced down every bite, and she smiled, and I smiled back. And we were two liars sitting across from each other, pretending everything was fine. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat in the living room with my phone in my hand. I pulled up 911. My finger hovered over the call button. I thought about Robert, 35 years old, collapsing while mowing his lawn. I thought about his parents burying their son. I thought about whether he'd felt afraid in his last moments or if he'd just felt sleepy, peaceful, trusting his wife's tea to help him rest. I thought about James, dying of a stroke at 51. Had he known? When his head started pounding, when the world started spinning, did some part of him suspect? Or did he blame himself for not going to the doctor sooner, for not taking better care, never knowing that the person trying to help him was the one killing him? I thought about Michael on dialysis, trusting Rose's tonics to support his system, drinking death while thinking it was healing. And Tom, God, Tom, I thought about Tom teaching me to fish, calling me kiddo, telling me that Grandma had saved his life. When he couldn't breathe at the end, when the oxygen wasn't enough anymore, did he thank her with his last breath for being there? 4 men, 4 lives, families destroyed. And the woman responsible was asleep upstairs, dreaming peacefully in her bed. I pressed call. 911, what's your emergency? My hand was shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Hello? Is anyone there? I need to report. I think someone has committed murder. Multiple murders. My voice didn't sound like my own. Ma'am, are you safe right now? Is the perpetrator with you? She's asleep. Upstairs. Okay. Can you tell me your name and location? I gave them the information, the address where I'd lived for 22 years, where I'd been safe and loved and happy. And who do you believe has committed these murders? My grandmother, Rose Whitmore. Saying her name out loud made it real, made it irreversible. I think she killed her 4 husbands over the course of over 37 years. There was a pause. Ma'am, I need you to stay calm. Can you explain why you believe this? So I did. I told them about the life insurance policies, the notebook, the garden, the poisons, the jar she'd given me just days ago. I talked for 15 minutes, spilling everything I'd discovered, everything I suspected, everything I'd been carrying alone for 2 months. The dispatcher stayed calm, professional. Officers are on their way to your location. I need you to stay on the line with me. Do not confront your grandmother. Stay somewhere safe until the officers arrive. Okay. Emma, that's your name, right? Yes. You did the right thing calling us. Had I? I didn't know anything anymore. I heard the sirens about 10 minutes later. Quiet at first, then louder, then right outside. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows, painting the living room in nauseating colors. I heard movement upstairs. Footsteps. Grandma's voice confused. Emma, what's happening? The doorbell rang. I went to answer it, and there were 2 officers standing on our porch, their faces serious. Emma Whitmore? Yes. We need to speak with Rose Whitmore. She appeared at the top of the stairs, wearing her nightgown and robe, her white hair loose around her shoulders. She looked small, fragile, 80 years old, and confused. What's going on? She asked. Emma. I couldn't answer. I couldn't look at her. One of the officers spoke. Mrs. Whitmore, we need you to come downstairs, please. She descended slowly, using the railing, and when she reached the bottom, she looked at me, really looked at me. And in that moment, I saw understanding dawn in her eyes. She knew I'd figured it out. She knew I'd called them. She knew everything was over. Emma, she said softly. Sweetheart. I'm sorry, I whispered. Mrs. Whitmore, we have some questions for you. You're not under arrest, but we'd like you to come to the station with us." "Of course, officers. Let me just get dressed." They let her go upstairs with a female officer accompanying her. She came back down 10 minutes later, dressed in one of her church outfits. A floral dress, sensible shoes, her pearl necklace. She looked like she was going to volunteer at the library. She picked up her purse, then she walked over to me. "I love you," she said. "I've always loved you. Everything I did, everything I've ever done, was out of love." I wanted to say I loved her too, but the words stuck in my throat. She smiled sadly. "You'll understand someday." Then she left with the officers, walking out of our house with her head held high, dignified to the end. I stood in the doorway and watched them drive away, those red and blue lights disappearing into the November night. And I collapsed. They kept her for questioning for 8 hours before officially arresting her. She didn't deny anything, didn't lawyer up or demand her rights. She just sat in that interrogation room and told them everything. "I helped them," she kept saying, according to the transcript I'd later read. "They were suffering, and I helped them find peace." She explained her methods in detail. The plants, the preparation, the careful dosing, how she'd learned it from her mother, who'd learned it from her grandmother, how it was an act of mercy, not murder. Robert was so anxious, he couldn't sleep. He was destroying himself with worry. I freed him from that. James had such pain, constant terrible headaches. He was miserable. I ended his suffering. Michael's kidneys were failing. He was on dialysis, which is a horrible way to live. I gave him peace. Tom couldn't breathe. He was drowning in his own body, desperate for air. I helped him let go. She saw herself as an angel of mercy. She'd reframed murder as love, and she believed it completely. The district attorney called it one of the most chilling cases she'd ever seen. Not because of violence or rage, but because of the complete lack of remorse combined with absolute conviction that she'd done good. They exhumed Tom's body first. He was the most recent, most likely to still show traces. They found aconitine in his tissues. Then they exhumed Michael and found traces of digitalis. Robert and James had been buried too long ago. Their remains were too degraded for conclusive toxicology. But it was enough. 4 counts of first-degree murder. Premeditated, calculated, deliberate. The fact that she'd used poison, that she'd killed slowly, over time, in a position of trust, made it worse in the eyes of the law. She pled guilty, didn't want a trial, didn't want to fight it, just asked if she could make a statement. They allowed it. "I want my granddaughter to know," she said from the stand, "that I never would have hurt her. Emma was different. She was family. I loved her truly. The others, I loved them too, but it wasn't the same. They served a purpose. They gave me companionship, security, and then they gave me peace. But Emma was my blood. She was mine." Hearing that later, hearing her differentiate between the love she had for me and the love she had for the men she murdered, didn't comfort me the way she probably intended. It horrified me because it meant she had different categories of love. Some love kept you safe, other love got you killed, and the only reason I was in the safe category was genetics. The sentencing was 3 months later. The judge, a woman in her 60s who'd known Rose from church, actually cried while handing down the sentence. "Mrs. Whitmore, I've known you for 20 years. You taught my daughter to bake. You brought meals to my family when my husband was sick. And now I'm sending you to prison for the rest of your life, and I can't reconcile those two truths." 4 consecutive life sentences. No possibility of parole. At 81 years old, it was effectively a death sentence. Rose took it with grace. "Thank you, Your Honor. I understand." She was taken away. I didn't go to the sentencing. I couldn't. I haven't seen her since that night in November when the police took her away. It's December now. 3 years since I made that call. 3 years since my entire life imploded. The house is mine. No one else wanted it. The house where 4 men died, where a serial killer lived for 43 years. I kept it, though sometimes I don't know why. Maybe because it's the only home I've ever known. Maybe because running away felt like letting her win. I had to testify at several hearings. I had to explain to prosecutors and judges and lawyers how I figured it out. I had to detail every piece of evidence, every suspicion, every horrible moment of discovery. And I had to do it while reporters scribbled notes and artists sketched me, and the families of the dead men stared at me with a mixture of gratitude and hatred. Gratitude because I'd finally brought justice for their loved ones. Hatred because I'd lived with their killer for 22 years and never suspected a thing. Because I'd called her sweet. Because I'd loved her. Robert's sister found me after one hearing. She was 74, had flown in from Arizona. "Thank you," she said, gripping my hands. "Thank you for being brave enough to speak up." I couldn't tell her I'd almost stayed silent. I couldn't tell her that I'd spent 2 months knowing and doing nothing. I couldn't tell her that even now, even with everything I know, part of me still misses my grandmother. James's daughter, older than me in her late 40s, wasn't as kind. "You lived with her," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "You ate her food. You let her raise you. You called her grandma while my father was dead in the ground because of her." "I was 7 years old when he died." "You were 29 when you figured it out. How long did you sit on that information? How long did you protect her?" I had no answer. She was right. Michael's nephew actually apologized to me. "I'm sorry you had to be the one to do this," he said. "I can't imagine how hard it is to turn in your own family." Tom's children were split. His son wanted nothing to do with me. I was tainted by association. His daughter understood. "Dad loved Rose," she said, "and he loved you. He'd want you to know that none of this is your fault." But it feels like my fault. The media had a field day, of course. "Sweet Grandma Serial Killer" was the headline everywhere. True crime podcasts covered the case. A book came out. I didn't read it. There's a documentary in production. I refused to participate. I've done exactly one interview. A journalist from the New York Times who promised to let me tell my side. I don't know if I succeeded. How do you explain loving someone who's a monster? How do you defend staying silent while simultaneously justifying speaking up? How do you live with the fact that you're only alive because of biological luck? She writes to me. Every week, a letter arrives from the correctional facility in Connecticut where she's serving her sentence, neat handwriting on lined prison stationery. She tells me about her days, the routines, the other inmates, her prayer group, her garden work in the prison greenhouse. She signs every letter. "All my love, Grandma." I've never responded. I keep them in a box in my closet, unread mostly. But sometimes late at night when I can't sleep, I read them. I hope you're eating well. I hope you're taking care of yourself. I hope you've forgiven me. I hope you understand I did what I thought was right. I miss you every day. You're all I have. That last one appears in almost every letter. You're all I have. As if I'm the one who abandoned her. As if she's the victim in all of this. But there are other lines too. Lines that make my skin crawl. Your mother would be so proud of you. You have my strength, my determination. You're more like me than you know. That's what haunts me most, because she's right in a way. I am like her. I learned from her. She taught me patience, taught me planning, taught me how to present one face to the world while hiding another. She taught me how to keep secrets. I used those skills to catch her. But what else might I use them for? Sometimes I dream that I'm making tea, chamomile with honey, and there's a man in my dream, no face, just a presence. And I'm handing him the cup, and I'm smiling, and I'm thinking about insurance policies. Then I wake up gasping, terrified of what I might become. People ask me all the time, how did you do it? How did you turn in your own grandmother? And the truth is, I don't know. In that moment, sitting with my phone in my hand on Thanksgiving night, I wasn't thinking about justice or morality or the greater good. I was thinking about 4 dead men. I was thinking about Tom calling me kiddo. I was thinking about how I'd never be able to look at myself in the mirror if I let this continue. But I was also thinking about self-preservation. Because as much as I wanted to believe I was safe, that I was different, that she'd never hurt me, I couldn't be sure. And I couldn't live in that uncertainty. So maybe I didn't turn her in because it was the right thing to do. Maybe I did it because I was afraid, and maybe that makes me a coward, or maybe it makes me smart. I don't know anymore. What I do know is this: there are no heroes in this story. Not me, certainly not her. Just two women who loved each other, and one of whom was a killer, and one of whom had to make an impossible choice. Would I do it again? If I could go back to that November night, knowing what it would cost, the loneliness, the guilt, the endless questions, the nightmares, would I still make that call? Yes. But I'd never forgive myself for it, and I'd never stop missing her. The house, as I said, is mine, along with what was left of her money, though most of it went to legal fees and restitution to the victims' families. I kept the insurance documents, the notebook, even the jar of poison. Properly disposed of eventually, but I held on to it for months, just looking at it, trying to understand. I kept her garden too. I know I shouldn't. I should have ripped out every foxglove, every monk's hood, every lily of the valley, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I learned their names. I studied them. I understand now how she did it, how she harvested, how she prepared, how she administered. I understand the chemistry, the toxicology, the careful calculations. I tell myself it's academic interest, research, understanding. But sometimes I wonder if I'm keeping her legacy alive. The prison staff still calls her that. Sweet Nana Rose. I know this because one of the guards called me once, concerned that she hadn't been receiving replies to her letters. Was I okay? Did I need anything? I almost laughed. She'd murdered 4 men, and the guards were worried about me hurting her feelings. But that's the thing about my grandmother. She charms everyone, always has. The other inmates love her. She teaches cooking classes. She counsels younger prisoners. She's exactly who she always was. A kind, gentle, caring woman who helps people. She's just also a serial killer. Those two truths exist simultaneously, and I've had to accept that. People want monsters to be monstrous. They want evil to be obvious, recognizable. They want the serial killers to have dead eyes and sinister smiles. They want to believe they'd see it coming. But my grandmother makes apple pie. She volunteers, she prays, she loves deeply and truly, and she kills people. Both things are real. It's Christmas Eve, 3 years later. I'm sitting in the living room of the house where I grew up, where 4 men died, where I learned the truth about love and poison. There's a letter on the table. It arrived yesterday. I haven't opened it yet. The tree is up. I couldn't bring myself not to have one. Grandma and I always decorated together. It was tradition. This year I did it alone. I pour myself a cup of tea, store-bought, pre-made. I haven't made tea from scratch since that November night. I don't think I ever will again. I pick up the letter, hold it in my hands, feel the weight of it. Inside is probably the same thing as always. Her routine, her garden, her love, her insistence that I understand, that I forgive, that I visit. I'll never visit. But I can't bring myself to throw away the letters either. So they sit in a box, in my closet, next to her notebook and the photos of her 4 dead husbands and all the other evidence of a life I thought I knew. Tomorrow I'll wake up. I'll go through the motions of Christmas alone. I'll eat food that no one has tampered with. I'll look at the foxglove in the garden and think about death disguised as beauty. And I'll wonder, like I do every day, if I did the right thing. I saved future victims. Maybe. The prosecutor said Grandma had been corresponding with a widower from her church before her arrest. She'd been making plans. So maybe I stopped husband number 5 from existing. Maybe I saved a life. But I destroyed one too. Not just hers, my own. Because the girl who loved Sweet Nana Rose died the day I found that notebook in the attic. The girl who believed in goodness and safety and unconditional love didn't survive the truth. In her place is someone harder, someone suspicious, someone who checks every cup of tea and reads about toxicology and understands that love is not safety. Someone more like my grandmother than I ever wanted to be. And that, more than anything else, is what keeps me awake at night. Not the 4 dead men, though I think about them constantly. Not the prison sentence, though I carry the weight of it. Not even the loneliness, though it's crushing sometimes. What haunts me is the fear that she was right, that I'm more like her than I know, that the same patience, the same careful planning, the same ability to separate love from morality. That it's all there inside me too, waiting. Because I learned from the best. And that knowledge, that terrible knowledge that I carry her legacy, her lessons, her capacity for calculated coldness, that's the real poison she left me with. The insurance money, the evidence, the house, those I can handle. But this, the fear of what I might be capable of, that's what she truly passed down to me. And unlike the foxglove in the garden, I can't just dig it out and destroy it. It's rooted too deep. So yes, I'm the one who turned her in. I'm the one who made that call, who brought justice for 4 dead men, who sent sweet Nana Rose to prison for the rest of her life. And I'm the one who has to live with it every single day. People call me brave. They call me a hero. They say I did the right thing. But late at night, when I'm alone in this house, I pour myself tea and I wonder, what would I have done if I wasn't afraid? Would I have let her continue? Would I have helped her? Would I have looked away? I'll never know, and maybe that's the most terrifying thing of all.